But yeah, welcome to the podcast, dude. When I saw your film, it was a short film, but it was a long short film. It was like
Yes.
45
A
minutes.
long
Yeah.
short, a short long.
Um,
Yes.
well, I mean, I can somewhat relate to that. I wrote like a 45-page script, and it ended up
Yeah.
turning into an hour 20 at one point, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh shoot, okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Terrible for getting into festivals. It was difficult.
oh, dude, yeah, it's awful. Because you don't really have a great slot to put it in,
Right.
because
Yeah.
generally like 10, 15 minutes or something like that.
hmm
Did uh did it end up going in short film categories anyway, or did you have to kind
So
of pick and choose your film festivals a little bit more wisely?
we did have to pick and choose a bit more wisely, but some of them have different I don't know, guideposts where like some of them consider 40 minutes a featurette. Some of them, the max for shorts is like 50 minutes. So it just kind of depended. We did get into it, a handful, and we did get like some awards and stuff like that. But yeah, it was definitely, if it was shorter, it would have been a lot easier, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it's like this whole slot thing. Well, I could program this one 40-minute short slash feature, or I could program 10 4-minute shorts. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, it was a bit difficult, but I learned my lesson there. As far as marketability goes, is important.
Well, I mean, it's a passion project just ends up turning into whatever it turns into, and then at the end of the day, you just kind of end up eating whatever it is that is
Yeah.
put on your plate, and then you decide whether or not you want to make the same meal again.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But go ahead and introduce yourself and tell me how you got started doing what you do.
Yes. So my name is Malakai Beisel. I'm primarily a writer director, but I have done it all. I was always making movies as a kid. Like we had borrowed my like older aunt and uncle's like over the shoulder VHS camcorder for a while. Like, and when I say borrowed, we had it for like 7 years. I don't know why, but like me and my cousins would just, we figured out you could do stop motion because you could pause and record stuff like that. We used to do all these, like, I would be a British guy, showing how I made this magnificent fort, and like it was like an HGTV show type of thing. I don't know what we were going for, but just making stupid stuff like that. And then I had done that forever with different cameras that I had, with my cousins and stuff. And then I also was a musician my whole life. So I was always kind of in the artistic creative world, like, oh, we need a music video. Okay, well, I can do that. Or, we need music for this movie that we made. Well, we have a band, or I can write a song for that. And then they kind of just coincided and escalated together. And then I was like, okay, well, I need kind of a backup plan. And I was lucky enough to have a scholarship for college. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go to college because, just in case, right? I mean, this isn't very lucrative. This isn't a very easy career to pursue, right?
Hmm.
And so I got a degree in communication through journalism, and was still making films all the meanwhile. And I worked in news for a little bit as like a night crawler, and I hated it. I hate working in news. It was just not creative like I thought it was going to be. And then I was like, well, I'm just going to keep making movies. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make this one. I'm going to put this together. And then you learn from that. And then the next movie, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this stuff a little bit different. And then, flash forward, I don't know, 10 years later, now I'm able to get people that are professional. They are DPs, they are professional actors, they are, raising bigger chunks of money. And it just kind of escalates from there. But like everything in my life is all fueled into this pursuit of creative passion, I guess. So that's kind of
Hmm.
like the brief overview.
Okay. Is your time at the news kind of what inspired the plot line for your film Dead End Dreams?
mm, no,
Because there's
not
some
necessarily.
similarities there of not being creatively fulfilled and then giving a
Right.
plot of what it is.
Yeah, not necessarily. I guess, you know what? Actually, I guess it would, because in Dead End Dreams, the characters are kind of two different versions of myself. Like there's the person that wants to, pursue the dreams, but there's also the person that's the realist that's like, no, I got to do I have responsibilities. And, how you try to keep those, you got to find the balance between those, between your passions and your responsibilities. So I guess in that aspect, where if you're going to, you don't want to be doing like the corporate stuff because like it's not creatively fulfilling. However, that's what makes you money, right?
Hmm.
That's how you do it. But also, if your head is in the clouds all the time and you're like, you know not pursuing responsibilities and you're not making money, like, well, are you really a great person to be around? You know, so it's like the balance of those. So I guess many aspects of my life inspired Dead End Dreams, but yeah, the news I guess does have its place in there as well.
Is that your largest project to date?
Yeah, I would say that, not the longest, because like one of my earlier films was like, I call it the accidental feature, which was like supposed to be a lot shorter, and then it just became longer. Now, like, in retrospect, it's like, oh, I could have cut out so much stuff, right? But you learn from it. But yeah, I would say I've had a pretty consistent progression of, you know, bigger and bigger stuff as far as production quality, you know, budget, marketing, and, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, I would say it's the biggest one so far.
I got to back up just for personal interest. This isn't even great
Yeah.
for the podcast. I just want to know,
Okay.
stop motion. Did you do Lego videos?
No, ironically, no. I know the type of videos you're talking about,
Yeah,
but no, we were doing more like,
because that's
like
what got me into it. I did those.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I always loved like claymation and stuff like that. But when I say stop motion, we were doing like, for some reason, like stop motion with real people, where it would be like, okay, pause. Okay, now we move forward. I don't know, like there's no really reason to do that. Or it would be like, we had this big giant stuffed animal with like a cheetah, and like, okay, I'm gonna move that with my hands, and then like pause, and it would move up, you know, and a little bit at a time, that kind of thing. But yeah, no, I never really did the stuff with toys, strangely enough. I had a lot of them though.
I did one thing. It wasn't even Lego video related. It was just to see what it would look like, which is kind of what you end up doing with stop motion. Is like, what would this look
Yeah,
like if I tried
right.
to
Yeah,
animate it with frames? I pretended like I was driving a car, and I put like some car sound effects or like a NASCAR or something like that, and
yeah.
then I just rode through my living room like taking pictures me like on the floor. But then I would leave behind this like cotton ball trail
That's
of it,
awesome.
and then I go around the corner, and I came back, and I just ate it up like a vacuum. It was the
Yeah,
most random thing,
that's
but for some
awesome.
reason
I
I
love
don't.
that.
Yeah, it was just the thing with like filmmaking. Like half of it is just kind of figuring stuff out. It's not even
Oh,
nobody knows how to. I don't
100%.
think anybody knows how to make a movie. They just like, I
No.
got this thing in my head. There's some
Yeah,
steps that I can do to accomplish it, and then the
right.
rest is like you're relearning how to make a movie every time you go to make a film.
Yeah, 100%. It's like fake it till you make it, get like a bad stigma, but that is like, that's learning, AKA learning. You know, that's what the process is. Yeah. And just another thing on the stop motion thing, I did do, like, did you use Monkey Jam? Do you know what that
For
was?
my editing software.
No, so for animation, it was basically like you upload, 500 pictures you took, and Monkey Jam would like turn them into a video, basically. That's just like the program that I had found. And so I had made a video. It's like, I think it's unlisted on my YouTube channel, but where it's me as like, I'm like 14, I have a playing card, and I'm like, ooh, but it's all stop motion. And then like I put it into my ear and it disappears, right? And then like I pull it out of my mouth and I'm like, ooh, magic, right? It's like 10 seconds long. And funnily enough, my partner of 13 years now, we've been together for 13 years, she and her brother had seen this YouTube video before we even met. So like this weird like stop motion thing had come into my like my mythos of our relationship, which is just so funny. But yeah.
Okay, great side tangent. That scratched the itch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you wrote Dead End Dreams. Was there any particular skill set you either needed to develop or you did develop in order to be able to accomplish pulling that production off?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't heard a question posed quite like that. I would say that the skill set I learned was to write more realistically. Like I had been writing characters that were very, specifically like a character, an archetype of like the villain or, this person and that person. But with this one, I had really tried to hone in on like, what is this person's backstory? How do they speak? Do they, even down to like, this person may not use contractions. This person may not curse as much, and like even some of those things kind of filter out, by the end of it, but it helped give me guidelines and to really fulfill each specific character, and to like write the balance and to really practice with the rhythm of the dialogue, as far as like people repeating things in a certain phrase, a certain cadence, and things like that. But I think also the skill set that I had to really hone in on as well was this was my first time working with all professional actors that had like all auditioned via Backstage or whatever we had cast from, and to like writing I always like to write with the actors in mind, or like we put it on its feet, we rehearse and like hear how they speak. And so writing in that way and keeping it organic, which I've always done, but with these professionals around it, like they're acting anyway. So I guess that was a different experience for me, and it was something I've always kind of done, but it just kind of like sharpened that skill. I mean, hopefully, ideally.
Yeah. Well, the thing with it's a very character-driven story, and
100%.
I don't know, I forget the names of the actors, but they they did a phenomenal job portraying, what you wanted to. What was it like working with them to be able to deliver emotional dialogue in the way that you constructed?
Yeah, I mean, it was fun. Like first off, it was fun. It was a blast, and we were so privileged to have actors of that caliber because you know obviously, like, so you've seen the film, it's like 1 second it's very silly, like almost slapsticky, but then the next second, ideally, like it's very real and grounded and maybe makes you think about things. It's more emotional. So finding that balance in the actors was difficult. Like we had gone through several submissions, and some submissions were just like like just playing up just the silly, like what, like one guy's got like just a sucker in his mouth and he's like, what's up, and it's like, okay, but he didn't really have that like grounded presence. But then we found Angel. So he played Fenner. No, sorry, Angel played Sev. He was the guy with like the more the eccentric guy, the actor.
Hmm.
And he his audition, even though he's like the eccentric, the crazy, the flamboyant character, his audition was just kind of like really like he's kind of like throwing it off, like throwing it away. He wasn't like trying to ham it up. He wasn't trying to like deliver lines. He was just the character, which is really great. And obviously, like we kind of shaped it and styled it along the way. But that was interesting, finding someone that provides something that you didn't know the character needed, but also someone that's willing to work with the character and like it becomes a living, organic thing that we work together on. And then same thing with Ricky, who played Fenner. His audition was just like rage filled. He was just like yelling and going off, and like that he like improv that burp in his audition, which wasn't in the script originally. And like I was like, that's what this is, where it's like it's realistic. It's maybe gets a little laugh, but it's also like it was just grounded and it felt real and everything. So I think finding actors that are able to bring something you didn't know was there before, but can also be shaped and willing to work with you until the point that they know the characters better than you do. I feel like that was a really long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
You're good. Um, was there any like feedback in terms of the dialogue that the actors gave that you ended up changing?
You mean like changing based on what they had the feedback on?
Yeah, because there's an ironing out process when it comes to
Oh yeah.
acting it out, and then maybe we would tweak this little thing over here.
Mhm.
So I'm just wanting a little bit more in depth about the nuances of as a director working with actors on something that you wrote, because it's not like
Yeah.
you have a personal attachment to it because you wrote
Right.
it, and
Right.
so there's a little. Although you have writer directors tend to have a much more clearer idea of what they're what they're going for. That also gives like it can be a double-edged sword, because one, you don't want to pigeonhole the actors because they need a little bit more room and a little bit more
Mhm.
freedom to actually be able to bring something authentic, and they're not just trying to mouth read whatever you wrote.
Right.
And
Right.
so are there any things from a particular scene that you ended up changing based on the feedback from the actors?
Yeah. I mean, 100%. That's like I had written it and then I kind of shaped it as far as like doing table reads and things like that. And there comes a point where the actors begin to know the characters better than me. And I'm, every actor or every director has their own style. Of course, there's, Aaron Sorkin, who's like, it's this specific way. And that's fine. We love Aaron Sorkin movies, right? For me, it's, you know, there comes a point where the actors begin to know the characters better than I do, to where like Angel specifically had sent me a screenshot of his like marked up script, and he's like, I actually read it this way. I know you were kind of thinking this, but like this is where I think this is coming from. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, no, that's a good point. I see what you're saying. And like, yes, play it that way, to where they begin to know him better than I do. And then some of the dialogue, like there's certain things that obviously need to be said and conveyed, or certain things that are a rhythm and a cadence. But I'm definitely open, and I love to foster where the actors begin to say things in a different way than written, because it's consistent with them as their performance, of course. Again, these are actors that could easily do it like exactly word for word as scripted, of course, but I think that makes it more real. Even like as far as stuttering lines, or repeating something in a different way, because that is more realistic in dialogue, of course. We don't want dialogue to be hyper realistic, because that would be boring. We as people, if you listen to people just talk at like the airport, people are annoying, right? They just like circle for 3 minutes not saying anything. So you don't want that. But yes, 100%, the dialogue does change a little bit, and things get shaped differently. And some of that has to do with where these lines are coming from. Like there was you asked for like a specific point. We were in the scene where Griffin, Fenner's younger sister, is like, okay, I'm leaving, like I'm done with this, like I'm fed up. She's like, I'm leaving, I'm going to Frenchie's or whatever. And he's like, okay, well, you got the tattoo. And that scene was interesting because there's not a lot of dialogue spoken, but I really spoke with the actors and like talked about how like this is the final goodbye. Like, I know you're not, like, you say like those 3 lines, but then afterward in your eyes, you're saying, goodbye. Like, I messed up, like I'm asking you about your tattoo, but I'm really saying goodbye. I'm just trying to point out to you that I care and I remember. So yeah, things like that, it all definitely evolves, and it's living and organic.
Well, and when in the following scene that ends up happening, the character who's placed in charge of his sister after his mother's death, he ends up having a breakdown, as he's editing on his computer at night, and that scene, I think, honestly ended up defining the rest of the movie, and in terms of the direction of where it's going to go. And sometimes, the best dialogue that's spoken is the one that's never said, and
right.
I think that's when an actor is able to convey that just brings the audience in. It certainly brought me in.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and Ricky, who played Fenner in that scene, he was one of those actors, like, every actor has a different style or whatever. So like I was talking to him, about like where he's at emotionally, and like really like, okay, everyone, like give us a moment, because it's a very intimate scene, right? And Ricky's one of those guys that he was like, yeah, I know we've got all that. He's like, I can just cry. Like, he's like, I can just turn it on. Yeah, like he was doing it even before the take. Like he was like, yeah, just give me like 2 seconds. Okay, I'm gonna cry or whatever. Like he could do that. But obviously it's not that simple. Like he has to be emotionally there. And so like in that scene, the only thing he had asked me for was, he's like, just do me one favor. Don't say action. Like just go ahead and go over there, go back to, Video Village and start rolling, and then just don't say action, and I'll bring it. Because he didn't want that like distraction to get into character. So like, I think that was interesting, is learning everybody's different approaches, and how some people get into the emotional side of things. Some people, like to get emotional before the take, or like they're jumping up and down, like Jack Nicholson in The Shining or whatever. Like, I think that was really fun and interesting, is learning different people's approach. And there's not a right way. It's just,
well, what particularly added weight to that was because we had already seen crying previously in the film. It was coming mainly from the auditions of the actor character. And I'm like, oh, but if I was watching that, I'd be like, oh, shoot, that was a good audition. That was really, really good. And then we see just this raw version of it, and suddenly it all feels way more real. And it added a lot of weight, and I just wanted to point that out because I certainly appreciated it. I have a little bit of a deeper question. Typically, I like to save these sorts of questions for the more later in the podcast, but given that it's pertaining to the film, I think it's appropriate to ask now. In order to write as well as direct a character-driven story, you have to understand something, at least something key about human nature. What is your understanding about people, and how did that affect creating these characters for Dead End Dreams?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that, for one, like I said, Fenner and Sev are like kind of 2 different sides of myself. So like I can put myself into those shoes. But also, I mean, as a writer, I think your characters all have a little piece of you, right? Like that's just kind of how it happens. You're the one writing. So I think to write characters that have this depth, you know, like when I first had written like this draft, it was originally just supposed to be like a silly, like improv, like Curb Your Enthusiasm style. Like that was like 2 or 3 years before I even decided to make it. Like, and then I found it again later. And I had like read it with a new perspective of like, okay, well, if this is like funny, but like, what is the deeper story here? What is the deeper thing, you know? And so I really just kind of focused and honed in on these characters and like figured out what their backstories were, why this is going on. And not everything has to be exactly figured out. Like, you know, what this beef specifically was between the characters isn't quite that important, but it's the emotional resonance. And I think if we all look hard enough, some of us not, even some of us don't even have to look that hard, but like we've experienced the range of emotions that these characters go through, you know, and like I think a big one is that we want to try to ignore these past traumas or whatever and kind of let things evolve naturally, but then also you want to kind of ignore it. And sometimes you have these outbursts, but then you go back to ignoring it. So I think it was just like each time I would kind of draft the script, I'd kind of look at it from a different perspective, you know, like what does it look like from Griffin's perspective, from Fenner's perspective, Sev's, you know, or even like even the director and the casting agent in the beginning, like they're obviously a little bit more of just like comedic characters in the opening of the film. However, like they have a story as well, you know, like it's all depending on who your perspective is, you know, who you're looking, whose eyes you're looking through. So, and I wanted to kind of bounce back and forth with that as well, because, you know, if you look at the, like I've heard a lot of different feedback from people. Like some people are like, oh, Sev's character, like he's the right one, you know, Fenner, he's just a jerk. Like he needs to like get over it or whatever. But some people are like, no, Fenner is right. He's doing the right thing. You know, Sev is coming up in here and messing everything up. And like, that's the point, you know, is that like, it's all from which perspective you're looking at it through. So that was kind of like, so I kind of just, every time I would go through the draft of the script, I would try to keep those things in mind. Does that answer the question? I'm sorry. I feel like I am just giving the longest non-answers. I'm like a politician.
Because there was a very clear dichotomy between the two main characters. And what I personally appreciated is that even though the actor, you know, was a little bit more privileged than, you know, his friend, you did portray that even people who, everybody still has their own struggles, and you respected the struggles that each character, you know, was going through, even though to some degree each character's criticism of the other was completely justified, you know, and
right?
Because the actor, although, you know, he has a little bit more wiggle room financially, he still has his own struggles and, you know, his subjective perception of what's going on in his life. And then you have a much more grounded, realistic thing that happens to the majority of people, particularly creatives, when they don't really have the financial means to be able to do what they want to do, even though that passion is still buried there. And, you know, when they hash it out in a very large scene, you know, it was probably the main scene that you were going for in the middle of the film. You know, when he's like drinking and he comes in and they hash out their problems. I don't know what particularly to call that scene, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
The argument.
Yeah, the argument. Yeah, and you know, getting to see those two things resolved is like you wrote some good characters. I'm very curious actually to hear a little bit more about your the next project that you're working on, because you said that you got when you ran this film through the film festivals, you got a little bit of attention, and now you're you know, now you're in production for a feature for a different script.
Yes. So you're talking about, you mentioned first about the different perspectives and how everyone has a point, and like that is a big thing for me, you know, like a lot of these great shows, and I'm not comparing my skills to the shows like this, but like Succession, you know, like, you know, the Logan Roy is the biggest jerk of them all, you know, he's evil, he's the villain of the show, right? But however, they make a point of going through his backstory, and like doesn't make what he's doing right, but it's like hurt people, right? You know, and I think that's a big thing that, you know, it transpires time. Like everyone has these emotions, and, you know, there is no perfect being, you know, and so I think everyone has their problems. And so I really tried to make sure that there was no person that's just wrong in the script. Everyone has a great point, right? And you talked about the argument scene and how, like, yes, that was that was kind of like the pivotal scene of the film. You know, like there was even a moment where I was like, if I had to cut this movie down to get it into more festivals, like it would just be this scene, right? You know, like I could do that because it's like a 7-minute scene or whatever. It's a very long scene, you know, and like, because that just is kind of the bulk of it. I didn't decide to do that, however, which I'm glad. I don't want to cut out all the other stuff. But yes, that scene, they bring up these points and they mention things and they make pointed attacks at each other, but then also like Sev's character makes points like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way, or we start to hear glimpses of this beef that they have that we didn't really realize that they both hurt each other, you know, and it was also kind of a misunderstanding, but also they did genuinely hurt each other. And what I really tried to do by the end of it is, you know, that to me, it's not a happy ending. They boil up. People say the things they say toward each other or at each other, and then they can kind of resolve some things in themselves. It makes us feel better as we, you know, in an argument when we say hurtful things and we go on to regret later. However, they are both able to grow. They needed that. They needed that argument to move on in their own lives. And in the way I wrote it and attended it, however, I'm open to interpretation. I think that's the beauty of a film and any kind of creative piece. I don't think they ever talked again by the end. They have that final phone call and it's a little bit awkward. They've hashed out their beef a little bit and they can move on separate. But I think this was just a little side quest that they needed to fulfill themselves. And I like storytelling like that because you have some resolution, you complete arcs. However, everything doesn't end with a bow on top, you know? So you did kind of cut out during your question, but does that kind of answer is what you were talking about?
Yeah, it does. Am I coming okay now?
Yes, it is better now.
Okay, good. At what point did you feel that the script was finished enough to be able to begin production, or pre-production rather?
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of like what I was saying before, like a script is never finished until you're like shooting it, right? Oh, sorry. Lunchbox.
I love the pink chair.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's my partner gave that to me. She ordered one, and then it came with two for some reason. They sent an extra one. I don't know why, and I was like, I'll take it.
It's a free chair.
Yeah, hell yeah, free chair. But anyway, yeah, a script is never finished until you're making it. You know, like it's organic. So, you know, I had a draft, and then we would do a table read virtually because some people were out of town. And like, okay, cool. And then I'll take notes and kind of shape it around new things that I have learned or things that are said or things we talked about. And then, you know, then we do the rehearsals and then we kind of shape it a little bit differently. And then all the way up to, you know, the bigger productions you get to, like, obviously you can't do this. You have to have like a locked thing because everyone is based around that. But for this, it was still like kind of a smaller production, you know, down to like the day before we're shooting. I'm like, okay, this has been tweaked a little bit, nothing crazy. You know, I'm not trying to throw the actors off or anything like that, but just
you threw a couple extra commas in there, you know?
Yeah. You know, hey, a comma goes a long way, or a good, you know, what is what's the an M dash? I love a good M dash, you know, where it's like the thick hyphen. But yeah, and then you're just like, okay, this is the script that we're going to, and this is our key, this is our guide, and then you also have several different other types of guides so that everyone is on the same page. So yeah, it's kind of a living, breathing document until it just cannot be anymore.
Where are you based out of?
I am in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So like we shot here in Fort Wayne, and then, you know, but I also do like my commercial work, like a lot more like in Indy and sometimes in Chicago. Yeah, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Yeah. Where are you out of?
I'm based out of Dayton, Ohio. You know,
okay,
sandwiched. Cool. You know where that is?
Yeah.
Okay, for the rest of the people who might be listening, that is sandwiched almost the middle point between Cincinnati and Columbus, home of the Wright brothers.
Right. Heck yeah. And
for
the people that don't know, Cincinnati and Columbus.
Yeah, I normally I'll just say like Cincinnati for generalities, but
so here's California.
You're a little closer.
And you're over there. Yeah.
I'm gonna start using my hand as a map. You know, Michigan, Iowa, that sort of thing. How did you go about sourcing your crew up in Fort Wayne?
Yeah, so we actually have a smaller little like indie film community here. I mean, I feel like community is a strong word. I mean, some people might use that word, but there's like a collection, there's like a handful of
A
filmmakers
Facebook
here, and a
group.
lot of, yeah, basically. But a lot of people do like a lot of work in indie, you know, and stuff like that, you know, or in even Chicago and things like that. But they're based out of Fort Wayne because indie's only, you know, 2 hours away. So the way we did this one, so like I guess I should say first that I was originally going to just kind of shoot this myself, and like I was gonna not make much of it, you know, write it, direct it, and then like kind of just source some people around, you know, within my little small collection of people. But then I was like, you know, I think I could actually make this project bigger. Like I think I could do it right, you know, like it was one of those things where I started getting like that imposter syndrome, you know, like with when you write a script first, it's like, this is the greatest thing that's ever been written. And then the next draft is, this is terrible. I should never show this. And then the next draft is, I'm a god. And then you know, the fourth draft is, I am nothing, you know. But like, I really got a lot of support from my partner. You know, she was like, no, this, I was like, is this good? Should I make this? She's like, yes, this is really good. You know, and I'm like, it's funny, right? And her, you know, the thing I always tell people is like, she was one that was like, no, it's sad. Like, I see a lot of your own personal traumas in this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that. And that's kind of what helped me blend the deeper emotional stuff with the comedic stuff, you know, because she could see what I could of my parts of myself in there that I couldn't see at first. But anyway, you know, I had worked on another production and I met Victoria Britton, who she was a producer and AD on Dead End Dreams. And I was telling her about the project and I was like, you know, I really like to work with someone, you know, like her, like a producer and AD and everything. And which I hadn't really done with someone that did that professionally, you know, like she had. And I was like, okay, cool. So then I sent her the script and she's like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And we started kind of putting it together. And she has a big collection of people, you know, she's got like a big Rolodex basically of people. And she's like really helped foster the idea of like, we can make this like legit, you know, we could get the people. I know these people, I know this person. And, you know, so it was like, okay, cool. Like Joe Frank, DP, she knows him. Like, okay, heck yeah, I love this guy. I love his stuff. You know, let's do it. And like, oh, Liz Wolford for sound. Like, heck yeah, let's get her. And like, these are people that I didn't know she had worked with before. But I was like, she really helped bring a lot of those people there. So, and that was just a lot of people that we knew. And then for casting, I think we used Backstage, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's basically just like, yeah, it's like a casting service. We put out the auditions and a lot of people came through, a lot of great people, a lot of duds, you know, but there was also a lot of people that like, they're like, this isn't the one for you, but like, keep going, you know, like we had this like 9-year-old little boy audition for Griffin because it was like open gender at first.
Mm-hmm.
And like, he killed it, dude. He was like cursing at the camera and he's like, I hate you, brother, blah, blah, blah. And like, he was great. It just like, he was a little bit too young. But I like sent him a message being like, just keep going, dude. Like you're going to be good, you know? But anyway, yeah. So we got the casting through there and like the character of Seb, you know, Angel Ray, who played him, came in like really late. I was like so worried that we weren't going to find someone. So then it's just like over the course of, I don't know, everyone that's worked with me will say like, I like to start really early. Like, I feel like there's no such thing as too much communication. So like we started in, I want to say like November or something. And then we ended up shooting in like spring or something like that. So we had like 6 months or whatever for pre-production for a film of this size, which wasn't, we could have done it in like a lot less time than that, but like we did that. And so we could foster these relationships and Zoom meet with people. And like, yeah, we just slowly put the team together and then we had like the rehearsals and all that kind of stuff, which really helped to make it so the first day of shooting isn't just like, hey, how are you? Okay, get to work. Like we could build those relationships. So yeah, it was kind of a mixture of a bunch of different things, but yeah, that's kind of how we put the crew together.
Are there any lessons that you learned from making this that you know, you're going to translate and be able to do better into the next production you're trying to do?
Yes, I would say, I mean, one of the main things that comes to mind is that, so Joe, I have, you know, me and Joe are kind of talking. So he was the DP for Dead End Dreams. he's going to be DPing the next feature. And we had actually talked about this as like, with that script, so with Dead End Dreams, it was like 24 pages, something like that, and by the end it was 40 minutes. So like, that learn that lesson of like how timing works out with things. But with this crew of the size that we had, and we shot it in, I think, 4 or 5 days, so we were shooting pretty simple shots. Like we got some cool shots, and I think they look good. I'm happy with how they look. But with the speed that we had to work at, and it was just a DP. We didn't even have we had a gaffer, but we didn't really have grips or anything like that. Joe was shooting everything himself. So everything is pretty simple, pretty much wides and overs, pretty much basic coverage, which is fine, but it's kind of like a TV show where it's like, like a sitcom where it's like you have 3 cameras at once. We didn't have 3 cameras at once, but that's kind of what it seems like. So we talked about making it look more cinematic, making it look more like a movie on the next one, because I think that was a lesson I learned, that we have depth in, this is kind of like technical stuff, but in our shots there's depth in the framing, but it's not deep. Like I don't know how to explain it, but like to get more cinematic and get more creative shots that aren't just basic stuff, because we were moving so fast, and to plan for that accordingly so we have the time to do it. So I think that was a big thing as far as being more cinematic with the cinematography. And other things to take lessons from, I think, I was pretty new to the whole like legal side of things. We didn't have a lot of legal stuff on Dead End Dreams, but as far as like,
this is why there's whole people dedicated to this aspect.
Yes,
There's
100%. Yeah, like contracts and paperwork and taxes and that kind of stuff, which Victoria knows a lot about, and she helped. She was kind of handled that side on Dead End Dreams. But for this bigger project, we're like doing a lot of research on that kind of stuff. So I guess those are the first 2 things that come to mind. It's kind of like the technical side of things, but the bigger you get, right, the other non-creative stuff that you have to worry about, right? Which I enjoy doing. It's just you don't know what you don't know. So I think just a big learning process in general.
Have you reached out to like a film lawyer for this next one or something like that in that regard?
Yeah, we've talked to a couple actually. I've got a list of people to reach out to as well. There's not a lot of entertainment lawyers in Indiana, and they don't have to be in Indiana, but we want to find specifically, like an entertainment lawyer that's not too big where they're like, oh, these dumb kids, they don't know what they're doing. We don't want that. We also want someone that like knows what they're doing.
Where are they from? Indiana? Oh God.
Yeah, exactly. Indy who? Yeah. So we're definitely looking into that side of things.
Okay. How far off the ground? Because it seems like you're still pretty much in pre-production for a lot of things, and you're still fishing around. Where does the producer side of it come into? What kind of budget are you trying to go for and work with here?
For the feature?
Yes.
So we are looking for $1 million, and which I always say to people, it's a lot of money for like probably for me and for you, like, but as far as a movie goes, that's like low. That is like nothing, because you think of food, half that's food and the legal stuff and the taxes and the payroll.
Most of the money doesn't even go toward the production. It's just just going to like making sure that like you're covering your butt.
Right. Yeah. Or like generators and gear, or like paying a police officer to be on set one day to block a street off, stuff like that, which is all needed, of course. But yes, so we're looking for $1 million, and I would say we're still kind of in development on that. We're hoping to be into pre-production in the spring, or like the winter, I guess. And right now we're kind of at the stage of like reaching out to the people that we want to work with, like Joe, or even, the same actors from Dead End Dreams, Angel and Ricky, and being like, okay, this is with the plan. We're not doing anything yet, but just like don't hold your breath, don't wait, don't not take work or anything like that. But just so it's coming. That way, like I always believe, like I said, I'm like early communication. So then when we're ready to go, it's like, boom, remember that? Let's go. That type of thing. And like budget wise, Victoria and I are working again together on this. As far as getting the budget where it needs to be, like, do we kind of take a little bit less money here, but and put it more on the screen? Or it's like, well, marketing is a big thing. Like we want to have a good PR team, and like, okay, well, it'd be great to hire a poster designer, but like I could do the poster design, but also I want that third party, so we're really trying to balance the budget as where we're at right now.
You have to have a high resolution of thinking in order to actually just be able to parse through everything
Yeah.
that you're going to end up doing in order to not go over budget.
Yeah. And like, you want to make sure you have, like, there's like a 10% contingency built in, so ideally you don't spend that money, right? But it's like the just, just in case act of God type of backup money. And you got to think about, there's back end points, and you got to consider, like, when you work with SAG, you have to pay a bond fee, which is like a deposit, like basically like a down deposit for how, like, all the actors you're going to pay. So it's not extra money, but it's money you have to pay like right off rip before, like the weekly payments, which is like half. So like, you got to make sure you have that ready to go. And then, you got to cover, like you said, you got to cover your butt as far as the timeline of things, as far as like, you can't ask SAG actors to do certain things. So yes, it's a big thing, which I enjoy doing, but like, it's definitely very nitpicky.
Is there anything like you think indie filmmakers need to know about SAG in terms of how to go about working with them that you think would be beneficial?
Yeah, well, I mean, we haven't even contacted our like SAG representative yet. So like, it's like, I think like 2 or 3 months before you actually get to production, you contact them, and they're like, okay, here's your SAG representative, and they like guide you through things. So like, we haven't actually worked with them yet. However, SAG specifically, like their website, sag.com or whatever it is, has this all broken out into like all the contracts and the guidelines and everything like that. So like, it's just a big research thing as far as you can go on there and they have everything broken out, and like, yeah, it's a 45-page contract, but just read it. If you're not willing to take the time to read through a contract, why would I trust you with $1 million? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
Do the work, do the research. You don't know what you don't know, and take notes. Like we have, like, Victoria and I have this huge Google Drive with just like everything broken out, all these notes, and like, these are the notes on how police picture cars should work, and these are the notes on like child actors, they have to have, a teacher on set, and blah blah blah. So yeah, I think just doing the work of the research, because you don't know what you don't know, and so just learn. So I think that's a big tip I would give on SAG stuff.
I didn't know that. Like the teachers on set, because there's, SAG has a specific amount of like, depending on what level of filmmaking and budget that you're working with, because there's a tier range when it comes to working with SAG. It's not all like, okay, you have to furnish every single actor with a trailer,
right,
and then, all of their sparkling water and everything. It's just, it's so. In what pocket of, SAG representation that you have going on have you found to be the most difficult that you are trying to pull off? Because you want to accommodate people as much as you can, but you still have boundaries.
Of course, yeah. So there's like, there's several like in between ones, but there's like, high budget, which is like, I don't know, $200 million or whatever, and then like it goes down to what we're at is moderate low budget, MLB. I remember that because I think of baseball, MLB, and that's like 2 million to, I think, like 750,000 or something like that. And then it goes down to like low budget, even down to like micro budget, down to like shoestring budget, which is like $15,000, something like that. And like you said, the rules apply at different levels based on the tiers. So it's a good system. It's a guild, like it's like a union basically. It's made to protect the actors, which is great. So
it's somewhat accommodating too. Like, they keep in mind that, like, not every budget is going to be, Disney budget.
100%. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is great. I was really intimidated by the whole SAG thing before we started looking into it. And it seems just like if you just do the research and learn about it, like, you pretty much be all right. Like, I'm sure the bigger scale things, of course. But so I guess the thing that we're not fighting against, but we just have to really keep in mind is like, so at our budget, you don't have to pay anybody a certain range. Like, obviously we're trying to like pay people like more than the bare minimum, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But the only people you have to pay a specific amount or more at this level is stunt people. And there's obviously like a day rate, and there's like a weekly rate, which there's a crazy price break, which makes it so much better for the week. Right. And then like singers and choreographers and stuff like that, which is interesting, like where the union, they break into that kind of stuff. So obviously we don't have a lot of singing. We don't have singing in this feature that we're developing, so we're not worried about that. The stunt thing is nice to know. And we're still trying to pay people. We try to look at like, what would they be getting paid at, you know, a normal budget of this size. We want to do that or above, basically what we can, of course. But the other thing is that with the SAG, you have to provide like travel and lodging, you know, and there's like a certain thing with whether it's first class or, you know, the coach flight. And like I said, like I've got this all written down, but it's like, it's still all like floating in my head, you know, as far as like, and you can't ask them for like more than so many rehearsal or self tapes. And like, there's certain rules about rehearsals where you have to like, they have to be paid for the rehearsal. The travel and lodging is a big thing because then it's like, well, if we shoot here with this tax break, so that's a big thing as well. Like we shoot in Atlanta and there's a 30% tax break or whatever. Well, 30% tax break, but if everyone's based in LA, what's the flight and lodging to here? And is that individual hotels? Is it an Airbnb? Is it a house? You know, and what's the flight like? And okay, once they get there, do we have a transpo team that drives them to places? What's their per diem? So like all that kind of stuff is where it gets nitty gritty. And like you had kind of said, I think it's a great thing. It's made to protect them and make sure they're not just, you know, you work and you pluck them out, put them where you want them, right? But yeah, so I'd say that's kind of like the biggest, like, it's tedious, you know, it's tedious and it's very important. Yeah, but that's kind of what we're working on right now.
Well, I mean, there is a lot of flakiness, tragically, in the indie side when you don't get to, when you don't start doing things on a professional level of expectation, and with different organizations like SAG. I was actually talking to a composer that I had on the podcast, and he expressed some interest in doing my next short because he saw my last one, which was cut out of a feature that we couldn't finish. Long story, but
interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting story. But anyway, like he was telling me about like some of the stuff he's been doing like in the last, I don't know, couple months, because he's been trying to grind away, you know, get his thing going up as a composer, and he's really great. He's really great, and you know, his work is definitely there. But he told me about like all of the flakiness he has had to deal with just because he's not the one in charge. You know, it's kind of different. Right. It's a different mindset to be the one looking for the job instead of being the one trying to create the job, not just for you, but also for other people. Yeah. And there's a lot of different considerations that have to go into that. But when you're the one that's actually having to, you know, find the work just for you because you're fulfilling one specific role that you're, you know, that your craft is in, yeah, then you're sort of at the mercy of whatever ends up happening. And it's there's a lot of flakiness that ends up happening because indie filmmakers will try to get things off the ground that aren't ready to get off the ground quite when they're ready to. There could be a lot of reasons for that. They're just really excited about it, or maybe they haven't done it yet. And, you know, especially for first time filmmakers. And by first time, I mean like between like film 1 and 2, you know, sometimes it's, which on the one hand, it's like, oh gosh, I don't want to have to deal with a big organization and all these requirements. And then, well, you have the other extreme too, where people's time is wasted. And even if they do contribute something to the project, that project might just vanish for some reason. A lot of vanishing happens, especially when 100%. You're just talking online. He was telling me about this period piece that he written some music for, and he wrote the piece. They said they liked it, and that was it. And he hadn't heard from them in 6 months. And yeah, you get stuff like that ends up happening. So there's a lot to be said for having, you know, guilds and stuff like that, because there is a real danger and aspect to it.
100%.
In the Midwest, we're like, we're part pro union and then we're part like, we'll just do it ourselves, you know. But you know, the corporations aren't there for the nitty and gritty, honest people who are trying to do things right. They're there for the extremes that do exist in the world.
100%. Yeah. I think that's a great that's a great example of why these things are good and can protect people. Like I noticed too with like reaching out to, like we've attached some name talent, you know, and when I was reaching out to some of these like agents and stuff like that, you know, I had learned a lot that I didn't know before as far as what it's like to talk to an agent. So there's like, there's a pay or play deal, which, do you know what that is?
Wait, pay to play?
Pay or play. So basically, it's like
I'm familiar with it. It's been a second since I read this like a business book for the independent filmmaking. It was like 400 pages long, but it was like two
right,
years
yeah,
ago. So I'm a
yeah,
little that it rings a bell. But go ahead and explain
yes.
it for the audience.
So it's like, okay, well, yeah, sure, my client will do this, but you have to pay. Like, it's either you're going to pay, no matter what, you're going to pay them X amount of money, whether the project is greenlit or not, whether it goes or not. So, and that's obviously to protect them. Like, hey, if this crashes and fails, like, we didn't waste our time, we're getting paid. So like, okay, I didn't realize that was a thing. So you got that. You also have like attachments, which you hear about in like Variety and Hollywood Reporter, like so and so has been attached to this project, which is great for marketing and sellability. Like, hey, would you like to invest money into this because we've got freaking Daniel Radcliffe is attached to this project, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he is not attached to my project. That's not a Freudian slip.
You
I
weren't
wish it was.
foreshadowing.
Yeah, no. That'd be cool though. But that, like, an attachment helps with marketability. However, it doesn't really have any legal ramifications. So like, that's why you hear like, so and so was supposed to be in this movie, and then 2 weeks out, they left or whatever, because it's not legal. It's just like it's like a document that expresses interest, but with no legal ramifications. Now, of course, you can add legal ramifications. So it's like it's a letter of intent is what it's called, or an attachment. So like I learned about that type of thing. And you've also got where you're offering like, hey, I can't offer you this a lot of money. However, would you like a producer credit? Would you like to help with producing the film? And some actors are like, yes, that's my real dream, is to be a producer. Or sometimes it's like a vanity credit. We're like, yes, that would just look good for me. Or sometimes it's like, we can't offer you as much money. However, you'll have full lodging, a whole place to yourself. So like, it's that kind of stuff too, is like, you want to protect people and make it worth their while. And again, not treat them just like they're like, you are known face, you are good, people like you, do this, go where I want you to go. So yeah, it's all about protecting people and making it worth their while, because like you had said, things crash and fail all the time, and you don't want to burn your own bridges before they've been fully crafted.
Yeah, it's true. If you don't mind me asking, what's the synopsis for this film that you're trying to get off the ground?
Yes, so it's a drama comedy, kind of similar in tone to Barry, the Bear, or the original Fargo film. It follows Dessa. She's an ignorant and naive and privileged diner manager, and she does anything her dad asks, no questions asked. And one day she's asked to launder money through the diner, and she's like, okay, sure, like whatever, I'll do it. And then that same day, or like the next day, they get robbed. The money gets lost. So she's trying to she recruits her coworkers, who are all like these oddball coworkers. One of them's her ex, one's an ex-con, one of them is like a baby daddy that is drug addicted, and they try to get the money back, and along the way learn that her father was involved in this like underground drug cartel, and that the death of her other father he had something to do with. And so like uncovering this toxic history that she hadn't looked into before. So it's kind of about which is conditional, is love conditional or is it unconditional? Do we look past the red flags? And it's also about found family, that true family is born in the fires of chaos. So that's kind of the spiel.
How many pages is it?
This is a feature. So it's 90, I think it's 92 pages right now. It's called Rolling Silver. Yeah, so it's a feature, and it's kind of similar in tone like Dead End Dreams, where it's like there's some really dramatic stuff, and obviously it's got like a crime element, but it's also, there's like some fun and silly kind of characters as well.
Yeah. Well, you were talking a little bit earlier about, when you were making Dead End Dreams, learning about what translates on the page isn't necessarily what's going to translate in the edit. So certainly,
Right.
I would imagine that you kept that in mind when you wrote 90
Yes.
pages for what's going to be probably a longer feature.
Yeah.
In that way.
Right.
What was it like keeping that process or keeping that fact in mind when you were writing the script?
Yeah. Well, I definitely, ideally it's like a page a minute. Like obviously that's like just like a general guideline, but generally it's like
that's what producers
scripts.
look at basically.
Yeah, 90 page thing, which is kind of rough. I mean, whatever. But I really made sure to, like, when I would go back and revise the script or refine it rather. It's like, okay, well, this scene, I could kind of play it out in my head, like, literally just act it out in my head or even act it out loud. And like, okay, that's about how long this scene is, or like, well, we don't need as much description here because we've been in this place before, and that just adds pages that aren't needed. Or like this big sequence, like that is going to take a long time because it does. So like you add more description, not unneeded description, but it's like, this scene takes a long time. So like they're looking at it and describing what's going on. And because that's what it's going to be like, we're seeing the visuals and we're in that moment. And so like really kind of refining each sequence of the script as far as the pacing that it should be. But I think also a benefit is if you're going for a 15-minute short and it turns out to be 40 minutes, that's a tough place to be in because it's already short. What can you cut? Like that's the whole point, right? But if you have a 90-page script and you shoot it and it turns out to be, 2 hours or even 2.5 hours, well, you can chop the crap out of it and it's still going to be a feature, right? Like you can really play around with that. You have a lot more room to cut and play with, especially if you have more characters, more cast. You can sometimes you just cut out a whole character, right? You hear about that all the time. Like, oh, I was in this feature, but I was completely cut out. Whereas in a short like Dead End Dreams, there's really only 2 characters. You can't really cut any of them out. So like I kept that in mind, but also like it is a different beast in itself. And yeah, so yeah, and then also a big thing too is I'm specifically going to hire an editor that's not myself because it's going to be a lot easier to like, kill your darlings, right? Instead of like me being so attached to my own project.
I need the firing squad. I just don't want to be on it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, one of the tendencies, especially if you're a writer-director, particularly when you're writing a script, and even more specifically, a character-driven story, is that the weakness is that there's so many opportunities that one line of dialogue or one description of a particular scene where a character is being really reflective adds a lot of screen time. Because we want to highlight all the meaning as much as we possibly can into the story because it's going to add value, but that also ends up destroying some other things in terms of the pacing because of not just of how it was written, but because of how it's being translated. And you don't necessarily need to have, if you're making everything meaningful, then those couple points where you want the meaning to define the film, it actually kind of dilutes the point that you really want to get to a little bit because you spent so much time trying to go overboard with, where these characters are. You're going overboard with being in the headspace of the characters where it's not always critical to the story.
Right. 100%. Yeah, I think that really applies to like blending comedy and drama as well. Like even in like the darkest dramas, like look at every horror movie, right? Like there's a couple laughs in the beginning of it, right? Because that sets the tone, and like then you have the counter, so like the moments are really sad because you were laughing before, and the moments are really funny because you were sad before. Like it's that dichotomy, that's why horror movies, we love them because it's not just torture, right? Like even in like Saw,
Right.
Like it's like clever and like there might be some like weird laughs or, cool moments, but it's not just torture. I know that was a weird example to make, but yeah, it's like, it's that balance because like you had said at first, you can have a scene of someone being like, man, I'm really sad. I'm just like staring off and like, okay, yeah, we're with them. But if you stay with them for too long, then it's like, what are we doing here? Yeah. What are we doing here? Which ironically in Dead End Dreams, there is that moment where they both don't know what's going on. They're waiting for the other one and they sit in a moment of silence and we cut back and forth. Right. And it's supposed to be like a laugh and it's like, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds or whatever. But in the first edit of it, like I thought it was hilarious. Like it was like 50 seconds of just silence, and I thought it was really funny. And like nothing happens. And then I did get the notes where they're like, I think it's a little bit too long to sit in silence. I was like, yes, you're right, because that's the thing too, is it's separating yourself where it's like, these are my friends, these are people I know and I worked with, and like this is super funny. But what makes it funny is that I know them. I have a personal relationship with them. But in the film, we're not quite there yet, we're not quite there yet to be able to relate to them and think it's funny. That's why, you see so many people who are like, my friend is really funny, like they should do comedy, and like they do comedy. And it's like, well, they're funny to your friends, but not to the whole, right?
Yeah, I know
So I
what
think
you're talking about.
that's definitely a balance of, editing and having an objective perspective as well.
Well, I mean, the audience isn't going to be caught up on what you have been doing. The only
Right.
context they have is what they've been watching.
Right.
That's their only
Exactly.
draw to it. They don't
Yeah.
have the subjective take that you do.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, Malachi, it's been great getting to know you and hearing about your production. And Dead End Dreams, I was so happy that it was not a bad movie because I didn't know what I was going
I
to
get
be
you.
saying this entire time. Because when somebody, if somebody like, if I see something that like, somebody wants to, hey, would you be willing to check this out? I'd be like,
Yeah.
all right. Hopefully
Yeah.
it's good because I don't know how it's going to go otherwise.
I know 100% what you mean, especially because like I think I was the one that reached out to you. You're probably like, oh, who the heck is this guy? Yeah. So
funny enough, so far on the number of people that have reached out to me on the podcast and I've brought them on, they usually end up being kind of among the more interesting because there's always that risk. I know the risk is there of being like, it's not like when I saw it was 40 minutes, I'm like, okay, there was something deliberate at the very least that was being tried to happen here.
Right.
So
right.
that was a green flag, even though for festivals that's a red flag. For me, it was a green flag.
Right.
But my final question to you is, what makes filmmaking worth the headaches and the heartbreaks?
What makes filmmaking worth the headaches and heartbreaks? Well, I would say that through film, you're able to display a story and characters that no matter how specific they are, and even though the specific things of their stories may not be exactly what happened to you, the more specific you are, ironically, the more relatable it is. And people can see themselves in these characters. And I think it's a way to express your own feelings as a creative and put yourself into these characters and whatnot. But also as an audience member, you can watch a film and realize something about yourself that you hadn't quite realized before, or see things from a new perspective, where you're like, oh, maybe I'm the jerk, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're like, oh, maybe I should forgive, this person or whatever. Or maybe you're like, no, that person is a jerk. Good thing I watched this movie. I think it's something that can challenge and present different ways of thinking that may not have been considered before.
Malachi, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.